What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, today's episode is brought to you by Fight Signal, but a little more on them later, because right now we're breaking down and predicting the UFC 314 co-main event. So, Nick, we got to get right into it.
Let's do it.
Paddy the Baddy versus Michael Chandler. This is the fight that perhaps I'm most excited about on this card because it could really go a lot of different ways. I mean, the consensus says that Paddy's 6-0 in the UFC. They both have 6 fights in the UFC. Paddy's 6-0. Mike is 2-4.
Right.
Mike is pushing 40. Paddy just turned 30. You know, the writing is kind of on the wall in a fight like that, but we're talking about Iron Michael Chandler here, who's always dangerous, always possesses that one-punch knockout power, and he ain't going away easy no matter who he's fighting.
Absolutely, and I agree with you that they both have 6 fights in the UFC, but they're a very different 6 fights, right?
6 different people, that's for
exactly.
sure.
Mike Chandler came in from Bellator and was thrust right into the top 5, the meaningful fights. Paddy was probably deserved to be down there popularity-wise after his first or second fight in the UFC. I mean, he was really picking up steam before he even got signed. But those 6 fights he had were basically put on the UFC's not a fast track and not a slow track, but the right track for Paddy. I think that Paddy, they saw the star power. They saw that the skills are there. And what I thought was most interesting about Paddy in the beginning was, yes, people saw him as this submission ace coming into the UFC, but he loves to entertain. He loves to strike, and he is damn sure willing to take a few shots to put on an exciting fight and maybe try to get a knockout himself. So I really, really do love this fight for the fans. I love it for Paddy, and I also love it for Michael Chandler because what Michael was going for and what he's been basically took his oars out of the water to wait for was the biggest star in the division to fight him. And he kind of got screwed with the Conor McGregor thing. And whether you want to blame Conor or blame the UFC or blame a potential presidential race in Ireland, whatever it is that keeps Conor out of it, it got in the way of Chandler. And I think that the UFC realized that Chandler is just a guy that wants to play ball. He wants to put on entertaining fights. You're basically going to have to give him $50,000 every time he fights for a bonus, but he's well worth it because the fans love to see him fight. And I think that Paddy coming in, being that brash loudmouth from the same region of the world that Conor McGregor comes from, wanting to put on an epic performance, wanting to really entertain with Chandler, is the closest thing that Chandler could have gotten to a Conor fight. I think Paddy the Baddy, even though he's not quite near the star and he doesn't have the accolades and he doesn't have the resume of the rest of the top 5 guys, he's more similar to Conor in a lot of ways, which Chandler was most excited for. So I really think that is an aspect of this fight that needs to be thought about because this is still a great fight for Mike Chandler. Now, when we get into the X's and O's of what Paddy does well, Paddy is a submission ace. He comes from great jiu-jitsu, lineage, and he knows how to get the fights where he wants them. He knows how to find his submissions, but he's not just a submission guy. He loves to strike. He loves to entertain, like I was saying, and that's what makes this fight so interesting because I believe round 1, as far as 2025 goes so far, round 1 will be round of the year. I'm not convinced we're going to see a round 2. I think this fight could end with a first round finish off one of these guys, but I think it's going to be maybe the most exciting round of the year. For sure, it's going to be the most exciting round of UFC 314. Yeah. So I'm really interested to see how Paddy implements his jiu-jitsu and how he implements his grappling because I think that's his best chance of finding the finish, but I don't think it's selling out for a takedown and trying to take Michael Chandler down. He's a great wrestler. I think he's got to land some big shots. Both of them get hit because they like to hit their opponent. So both of them are willing to take one, to land one. They both get hit pretty hard. And Paddy the Baddy has come out many times and said, Scousers don't get knocked out. Well, we have to take him at his word for it. And while Michael Chandler has an iron chin, he definitely is susceptible to getting rocked. We've seen it a few times, and we've even seen him get rocked and it lead to submission defeats. So I think that the best path for Paddy is to come out hot, engage in a firefight with Michael Chandler, make sure that Michael Chandler's biting on his mouthpiece, that he's swinging for the fences with every throw like he loves to do, get right out of the way of those, find a way to his back, or wait for him to shoot a shot and get a guillotine. I believe the superior submission artist is going to be Paddy, and I think he will find favorable submissions for him because of Michael Chandler's wrestling and his tenacity when he does want to attack.
Yeah, so breaking down Paddy and what he needs to do to win this fight before we get into the flip side of that, which is Michael Chandler, Paddy needs to bait the big movements out of Chandler. And that's not really hard to do. Michael Chandler likes explosive movement. He likes to throw strikes and step, switch stance as he's throwing. He covers a lot of distance while he's throwing. But and it can be a wrecking ball. It's like a tornado coming right at you. You got to move out of the way of it or you're going to get steamrolled. But when you have that much momentum and you're putting that much power into every shot, you tend to off balance a little bit, even if it's just for a split second. And Paddy's masterful at taking the back.
Yep.
I think if we're talking about what's Paddy's best strategy, most sure strategy to victory, it's to win by submission.
Yeah.
We know Paddy's a submission ace. He's, we don't see a lot of people come out of England that are submission artists to the level that Paddy is, but he's up there with the top Brazilians as far as submission ability goes in the UFC. He's very, very good at finding those subs, and he can do them from all different facets. A triangle choke off of his back. He can take the back and rear naked choke. He can do, in any variation thereof, heel hooks and whatnot. He's very good at all of it. But if he can get Michael to overcommit, and he's intelligent enough with his striking defense to sidestep, and I think he can have some back exposure.
Yeah.
And if he can get Michael Chandler's back and start to, even if he doesn't submit him in the first or second round, start to work on the back, work for those submissions, throw some punches to try to get the chin up of Chandler, he can start to compromise him. And then even though you're not going to stop Mike from making those big forward movements and using a lot of energy, you can slow down and diminish a little bit of the power.
For sure.
And that makes it easier the next time to see it coming and then to sidestep it and stuff like that. But Paddy's got to not be afraid of roping in the big shots.
Right.
And as he said, Scousers don't get knocked out. That's yet to be seen. But one thing's for sure, baiting Michael Chandler to look for that knockout is actually going to behoove Paddy, because it's going to put him in the positions to do what he does best, which is to work those submissions from getting back control, drag downs and stuff like that, getting Michael Chandler to the ground and starting to work his magic there. So for me, that's what Paddy really needs to do. But what are you thinking for Chandler? At almost 40 years old, how does Mike win this fight?
Well, before I give you the offense, I want to say that what we've seen out of Michael Chandler being such a decorated wrestler, and that's just ingrained in his mind and in his being, he's going to shoot, and inevitably wrestlers they give their back up a little bit. We saw it against Dustin Poirier, we saw it against Charles Oliveira, and I don't know if Paddy is quite as good of a submission artist as those guys. I'd venture to say he's in that discussion, but I think that's something that really does stick out as the most open hole in Michael Chandler's game, is leaving his back open to a guy who can find the back pretty well and is good at finding submissions when he gets there. The other thing is Michael Chandler on the offensive side has probably a little bit more power than Paddy. I think he lands with a little bit more power in his shots.
I'd agree with
because
that.
He puts more weight into it. And, obviously if you keep up with him on social media, he works out like a
bodybuilder.
Right, yeah. Exactly. I mean, he's like a CrossFit guy. I'm pretty sure when he retires, he'll be in the CrossFit games and maybe medaling.
Yeah.
But no, I think Paddy the Baddy leaves himself open. He gets pretty tall. And one thing we know about Michael Chandler, he's a wrestler. Again, at heart, he's going to be looking for level changes, and I think that's a great play for him. But also that overhand is going to be serving him if he can get Paddy to bite on the level change feints. If he does that, a wrestler's overhand is really beautiful, and it works perfectly if you like to do that step like he likes to do. Throw the two, step with it, and now you're halfway into a shot of some sort. Now, I would be careful shooting in on Paddy. Like I said, he's really good with the guillotine, and that could, of course, be transferred over to a back take or some top control of some kind. But I really think Michael Chandler needs to explore the grappling a little bit. I think he needs to go show Paddy a few level change feints, put some heavy shots on him to get the respect out of Paddy, and then he'll be biting on the feints a little bit more, and that will open up Chandler's ability to potentially take the fight to the ground, but also open up his chances at landing the big shots that he wants to land. I don't know if he's going to be able to land the big shots enough times to knock Paddy out, because Paddy has the chin, and while we've seen him get hit and hit hard in most of his fights, we've not really seen him get rocked. We've seen him have the chicken legs once or twice, but he hasn't really been dropped and looked like he was on the fence of being stopped. So I'm really interested in seeing how many shots Paddy's going to allow Michael Chandler to get through, because Chandler's attacks are powerful, but they aren't exactly the most well disguised.
Yeah.
He kind of shows you what he's going to do, and then he does the same thing over again. Think about Mauricio Rufy. The arsenal of tools that he throws at his guys, he threw at Bobby Green, was so vast that you don't know what's coming. Chandler's not going to spin and hit you with a heel kick, but he's going to throw the same few things over and over, and a lot of times he finds the angle and finds the shot. But I want to say one thing. I think that Paddy the Baddy is going to look to grapple but not be the offensive grappler. So I think Michael Chandler does need to look for those grappling opportunities, and I think one thing that he has to be cautious of is the push kick and the teep kick from Paddy. We've seen him have some success with that against other opponents, and Chandler's got a wide torso, a big body. It's a good big target for Paddy, and he gets pretty square, especially when he wants to either change levels and feint or he actually wants to shoot. So that body is going to be wide open for Paddy, and I think Chandler getting hit in the stomach a few times, being as muscle bound as he is, would zap his cardio a little bit, and that would pay dividends, because when Chandler's an explosive fighter as is. When he gets desperate, just like anybody else, he gets more explosive, more risky, and that's exactly what Paddy needs. Like you said, Paddy needs to get in there and turn on the storm.
Yeah.
And then let the storm be Michael Chandler. Let him go crazy, but you got to be calculated and cautious, because your opportunities are going to be there to probably get the fight completely finished, likely with a submission.
Well, I'll push back on you a little bit on this one.
Okay.
I don't think that Michael Chandler wants any part of grappling with Paddy Pimblett.
No.
I think he's susceptible to the submission, and I think Paddy can find it on him. I think Michael Chandler, truthfully, doesn't need to do anything different than he's always done inside the UFC's octagon,
right?
Which is to just let it all hang out, and it's either going to be enough or it's not.
Right.
He's going to come at Paddy with a storm. I think if he tries to take Paddy down, Paddy's very good off his back. He's got triangles. He's got guillotines. He's also got really good sweeps, out of the butterfly guard and stuff like that. So he could reverse position and find himself on top and then start to work, either mount or taking the back.
Right.
I think that Michael Chandler, in order to win this fight, needs to knock Paddy out.
Okay.
And I think he needs to do whatever he can to rope Paddy into a firefight. Paddy says Scousers don't get knocked out. Michael Chandler needs to say, guess what? That's because a Scouser hasn't fought me yet.
That's right.
And then he needs to go out there and knock him out. And it's either going to happen or it's not.
Right.
And that's where I kind of see this fight playing out for Michael Chandler. He's got to bite down, and he's got to force Paddy to bite down too. And it's going to be rock'em sock'em robots. And Mike just better hope that his chin holds up a little better and his punches have a little bit more pop on him. But I don't see Michael Chandler having some masterful technical secret or some sort of game plan that he needs to implement here that's specific to Paddy Pimblett. I think he needs to just get in there and do what he always does and never let a $50,000 bonus get in the way of a loss. That's Michael Chandler's motto. So
absolutely.
He's going to do that same thing, and I think we got to make our predictions now. Well,
let me go real quick, because I want to say one thing, and MMA math doesn't work. We all know that very well by now, but they have one common opponent. I'm pretty sure it's just Tony Ferguson that they've both faced, right?
Yeah.
Paddy didn't quite get him out of there. Michael Chandler had one of the most devastating knockouts of Tony Career's devastating knockout streak, right?
Yeah.
That kick, that picture is like that's like a thing of nightmares.
Like flattened his face.
Yeah, that was brutal. So MMA math doesn't work, but I will just say that they have one common opponent. We have to kind of bring that up just for the lack of, or for the sake of bringing it up. But I don't think that MMA math has anything to do with this fight. I think this is going to be a knockdown, drag out war. And whether it lasts 5 minutes or 15, we're going to get our money's worth. Hopefully UFC and the streaming and ESPN Plus doesn't completely lay an egg like they've been doing lately. And guys, before we finish up this conversation, we just want to thank today's sponsor, Fight Signal. Fight Signal is the tool that the real diehard fight fans are using to break down UFC fights from an analytical perspective. Fight Signal pools over 7,500 past UFC fights, compares the stylistic differences between the fighters and how the matchup may play out, and it even pulls what the sentiment on social media is, everything from Reddit, X, YouTube, and beyond. The pro version is $19 a month, but if you use our special code Barnhill, you get 50% off for life. Oh yeah.
Fight Signal has been over 80% correct on their predictions of all fights in 2025. Sign up at fightsignal.com. You'll wonder how you ever watched fights without it.
Thank you, Fight Signal. Now let's get back to the show. I think this fight is going to be so entertaining, and I really do think that Paddy the Baddy is going to be able to get Michael Chandler roped right into a firefight from the very beginning. We're going to see heavy hooks, big kicks, tons of stuff to zap the gas tank out of both guys. And I think both guys are going to land big shots. But I think Paddy the Baddy's going to have more success on the feet, staying a little bit tighter within the pocket, and I think he's going to wind up catching Chandler, dropping him. We've seen Chandler get cracked a few times, and even though he's still a live dog when he gets dropped, it's just one of those things where you have a good submission ace who has the power to knock you down and sort of flash knock down you for a second. He can jump right on top, and then that's where I think the most susceptible way for either of these two guys to get finished is by Michael Chandler getting submitted, likely off of getting cracked by coming in too explosive.
Yeah, I actually like Paddy's submission as well.
Okay.
But I'm going to say Paddy's submission in the third round.
Okay.
I know they're going to be sweaty in the third round. I know it's going to be harder to tie Chandler down in the third round, but Chandler ain't going out easy, man. No. He's not getting submitted in the first round. And I think the first round we're going to see Paddy get to the back.
Yeah.
We're going to see him work some stuff, maybe open Chandler up with some strikes or something like that, either from the back or the mounted position. I think Chandler's going to bounce back in the second round, come in with some big shots, but ultimately Paddy's going to take over the second half of the round. But I see Paddy Pimblett, just weathering the storm, showing that he's got a chin, showing that at 30 years old, he's ready to be a top 5 guy. He's ready to have his name in that conversation for who fights for the title. And I think he's going to be doing everything he can to get, because 155, make no mistake about it, especially with Topuria coming up, and Paddy wants that fight. Don't you fool yourself there. Paddy Pimblett still wants that fight. But with Topuria in the division now, you got to make a statement to be talked about for a title right now. And I think Paddy knows that. Neither one of these guys have ever let the fans down. They're both consummate showmen. Paddy Pimblett's going to be looking for that finish, and he's going to get it rear naked choke, third round. Paddy Pimblett is a top 5 fighter, and come next Monday morning, everybody's talking about Pimblett potentially being one fight away from a title shot.
I don't even think one fight away. I think if Topuria does wind up with that belt, Paddy Pimblett off a win over Michael Chandler has done everything he needs to get a title fight. They've got history. It would be a great fight, especially if he gets Chandler out of there. And also, I have to just say that if Conor McGregor would have beat Chandler, he would have absolutely gotten a title fight. So yeah. I have reason to believe that Paddy the Baddy might get the same, especially if Ilya is there. And you look at the rest of the division, Dustin's got one more left. It's likely not going to be a title fight. Arman has been pushed back to the back of the line by the UFC. So yeah, I really don't know. And the smart part of my brain is saying go decision, because these guys are going to go crazy and both are going to have moments in this fight, but it's likely going to go decision for Paddy. But I just feel like we're going to get some real fireworks in there, and I'm going to go second round submission for Paddy. I think he's going to find you know what? I was thinking rear naked choke, but I think he's got a pretty lethal guillotine. I think he's going to find a guillotine in round 2 after a crazy flurry. I think both guys wind up touching the canvas at some point, but I think guillotine finish round 2 for Paddy the Baddy is the way this fight ends.
So we're both picking submission. It's just which submission and which round.
Absolutely.